This week we're going to take a topic that we didn't talk about before, and you're going to see soon why. So let's start straight in with this week's parsha, with the plague of the blood. Source number 1. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God says to Moshe, אמור אל אהרון, say to Aaron, קח מתך ונתחה את חלמי מצרים, לנערותם ועל ירהום ועל אגמיהם ועל כל מקווה מהם ויהיו דם. He tells Moshe to tell Aaron to hit the Nile to turn the water into blood. Now, why doesn't he do it himself? So it says because the water saved Moshe. To show appreciation to the water, he didn't want to smite it. So he let Aaron smite it. But nevertheless, והיה דם בכל ארץ מצרים בעצים ובאבנים. The Nile, all the water in Egypt, turned into blood. First plague, we all know it from Pesach. ויעשו כן משה ואהרון כאשר ציווה השם. Moshe and Aaron did exactly what God commanded. וירם במטה ויח את המים אשר ביאור לעיני פרעה. He picked up the staff, he hit the water that's in the Nile to the eyes of Paro. ולעיני עבדיו, and to the eyes of his servants, ויהפכו כל המים אשר ביאור לדם. All the water turned into blood. והדגה אשר ביאור מתה, all the fish died, ויבאש היאור ולא יכלו מצרים לשתות, מים מן היאור. The Nile began to stink, nobody could drink from that water. ויהי דם בכל ארץ מצרים, and there was blood in all the land of Egypt, not just in the Niles, everywhere. They couldn't drink anything. ויעשו כן חרטומי מצרים בלעתיהם, and so did the Egyptian sorcerers, ויחזק לב פרעה ולא שמע להם כאשר דיבר השם. And the heart of Paro became harder, he didn't listen to the warning, partly because his magicians could also do it. ויפן פרעה ויבוא לביתו ולא שק ליבו גם לזאת. So Paro turned, went home, and he said to Moshe, tough luck, we're still going to enslave you, we're not sending anybody away. ויחפרו כל מצרים סביבות היאור מים לשתות, כי לא יכלו לשתות ממי היאור. So the Egyptians started digging wells all over the place to try to find water, because the water from the Nile wasn't drinkable. So Rashi explains this, the bottom of page number 1. ונהפכו לדם, the water turned to blood, לפי שאין גשמים יורדים במצרים. Sustenance in most of the places in the world comes from heaven, in the form of rain. In Egypt, sustenance came from a river. So usually people look at the sky to have their idols. The stars, the moon, the heavens are their idols. But in Egypt, what was the idol? The idol was the Nile, because the Nile gave them the sustenance. They lived off the Nile. ונילוס עולה ומשקה את הארץ, ומצרים עובדים לנילוס. So the Nilus, the Nile, gave the sustenance to the Egyptians. So the Nile became their idol. לפיכך, now we're going to start understand why God hit the Egyptians' God. The Nile itself he hit. How? ואחר כך חילקה אותם. First, he terrorized their God. He turned their God, the Nile, into blood. And then he hit them. That was the way. Let's go to page number 2. Amar Rabbi Avin Halevi Berabi. So Rabbi Avin said, look at Jews. Jews are always businessmen. What do you mean businessmen? Mimakat Adam Eshiru Israel. From the plague of blood, the Jews became rich. They were slaves. How does a slave become rich? A slave became rich because of the plague of blood. Ketzad, how? המצרי וישראל בבית אחד. There was an Egyptian and a Jew in one house. והגיגית מלאה במים. And there was a container full of water. והמצרי הולך למלות את הקיטון מתוכה. The Egyptian comes to take a cup from the barrel full of water. מוציאה מלאה דם. He takes it out. The water turns into blood. Not what it's water. It's clear. It's in a Jewish house. He takes a cup, puts it inside, And when he brings it up to drink, it turns into blood. Ve'Yisrael shote mayim. And at the same time, the Jew puts his cup inside, and he drinks the water. Umitzri dam mitoch hagigit. And the Egyptian drinks blood from inside the same barrel. Hamitzri omer lo. So the Egyptian tells the Jew, look, I'm thirsty, I need to drink something. Ten li biyadcha me'at mayim. So he says, you draw the water. Even in your hand, draw the water and I'm going to lick it from your hands. The Egyptian says to the Jew. Venoten lo. So the Jew does it. He takes the water, he gives it to him. Veneasim dam. And the water turns into blood. Amar lo nishte betoch kara ani v'ata beyachad. He says, you know what the Egyptian says? I have an idea. Let's take a big pot, right? And we're going to drink together. You're going to stand over here, I'm going to stand over here. We're going to pour the water right into both our mouth. Yeah? Israel shote mayim v'mitzri shote dam. Even that didn't help. It poured one side water for the Jew, the other side blood for the Egyptian. But there was a way for him to get water for the Egyptian. How? If the Jew told him, I'll sell you, if the Egyptian came to the Jew and says, I'll buy water from you, and for a large amount, like for $50 a cup, $100 a cup, $200 a cup, then it would stay water. וכשהיה לוקח מישראל בדמים יקרים, but when he would take the water from the Jew with expensive money, היה שותה מים, then it would work, he would drink water. But for that he needed to pay like $50 a cup, $100 a cup, whatever the Jew charged. מכאן העשירו ישראל. This is the first point where the Jews became rich. We're going to start to understand, it's a nice midrash, but we're going to go deeper into this whole story. What was happening over here? What was the idea? You know, Jews go and look at Jews all over the world. When Jews come to a country, why is there anti-Semitism? What's the main reason? I don't know if it's the main reason. It's anti-Semitism, there's anti-Semitism. But one of the main reasons for anti-Semitism is because no matter, here, take America for example. America, we have what? 0.5% of America are Jews? Less than 1%. Right? Less than 1% of Americans are Jews. I think it's about 0.5%. You know who holds all, I don't want to say all, 50% of the powerful positions everywhere? Jews. You can, the Goyim, the Gentiles are right when they say Jews control everything. We control the media, we control the banks, we control Hollywood, we control all the powerful positions in America. Is controlled by whom? Is controlled by the Jews. And the other nations are saying, hey, this is my country. In Spain, it happened the same thing. Spain was, the majority people were Gentile. 1% of the population was Jews, and what happened? The Jews took over. Finance minister in Spain was Jewish. Finance minister in Portugal was Jewish. All these places, all of Europe, all the powerful positions were held by Jews. People don't like it. The same thing, Pharaoh. It didn't just start in Europe. The same thing was in Pharaoh's time. The Jews became a problem. Even though they were 1%, 0.5%, but they're Jews. And if they're Jews, what happens? They take over the country. They take over the powerful positions. So for Pharaoh needed a solution for the Jews. So let's see. Source number 3. Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim. This is after Yosef passed away. A new king arose in Egypt. Asher lo yada et Yosef. They did not know Yosef. Vayomer el amo hine am bnei Yisrael rav ve'atzu imenu. It says, look at Jewish people, they're taking over. Not in numbers necessarily right there at the time. The Egyptians were much more many than the Jews. The problem, all the powerful positions were held by whom? By the Jews. They're taking over, guys, it's over. They control the country, they control the banks, they control the media, they control sciences, they control everything. Universities, whatever you want. The Jews control the entire world. That was the complaint. So then it says we need to find a final solution for the Jews. It's not something that happened with Hitler. the first time. The first time they were looking for the final solution was whom? Was Paro. So Paro comes and says, Hava nitchakma lo. It says, let's be smart. Penirbe. Why? Why do we need to be smart? Because right now they're 1%, but they're going to start multiplying. And they have all the power. You know what's going to happen soon? They're going to become Egypt. והיה כי תקרנה מלחמה, and we refrained if there's going to be a war, ונוסף גם הוא על שונאינו ונלחם בנו ועלה מן הארץ. He's going to join our enemies, and they're going together with their enemy. I know right now they don't have the numbers. The Jews don't have the number to attack us. Think in America, Jews, we don't have the power. If tomorrow America wants to kick out all the Jews, they can kick out all the Jews. We have not real power, so the same thing. But it says, but you know what we can do? We can join together with the Russians, with the enemies. And then together with the enemies, they're from the powerful inside, bring communism into the country, something that will never happen in America, so-called, and they're going to bring the Russians over. That's what's going to happen. They're going to, with the Russians from the outside, they have the numbers, the Jews from the inside together, and we're able to take over. Okay. So this is Paro's problem. He's got the original Jewish problem. That's Paro's problem. Let's continue with source number 4. This is from Eliyahu Rabbah, and over there he explains the plagues. And we're going to see. 10 מכות הביא הקדוש ברוך הוא על המצרים. There was 10 plagues that God brought on the Egyptians. וכולן לא בא עליהם אלא בשביל הדברים שהיו חושבים על ישראל לעשות. And the plagues are always measure against measure. All the punishment, whatever they tried to do to the Jews, God did to them. In other words, the things that the Egyptians wanted to do to the Jews, God did to the Egyptians. Let's see, what did the Egyptians want to do to the Jews? לפי שכל דבריו של הקדוש ברוך הוא אמת. The rule is that this is God's ways. מידה כנגד מידה, measure for measure. ואין מידה רוצה רעה יוצאת מלפניו אלא מידות טובות. In other words, everything that God does is a response to a measure by man. ובשביל מעשה למקולקלים של בני אדם, מידה רעה יוצאת עליהם. So if you think bad about somebody else, you're going to get bad yourself. This is how God works, measure for measure. So let's look. So why the first plague was the plague of blood, specifically? Da mipnei ba'alehem. Why was the first plague the blood? Mipnei. So this is the reason. See, they had a problem with the Jewish numbers. Right now they're only 0.5%, but they're becoming more and more. And just like in the Western world today, the Western world, 90% of the families have one child. Some of them have two. You know, that's the Western world. Right? But the Jews had how many kids? Had many kids. So they looked at demographics. It's true that today they're only 1%. But if it's going to continue this way, in 5, 6 generations, you know what's going to happen? They're going to be the majority. And then we're in trouble. That's the way they say. So what are they going to do? We're going to make sure there's not going to be any more Jewish children. What are we going to invent? We're going to invent something to take away the Jewish children. So rumors started circulating that the Jews are what? The Jews are dirty. Have you heard these rumors before? The Jews are like rats. And because the Jews are dirty, the Jews are like rats, we shouldn't let them bathe in our watering holes. So Jews were not allowed to bathe well in the Nile. They were not allowed to bathe in the Nile. Especially, so he said that's not such a big problem. It's not such a big problem for a man, but we're going to see it is going to be a big problem for women. Why? Let's see, look inside. מפני שהיו רואים את ישראל טובלים מטומאתם. They saw the Jewish people going into the Nile to purify themselves. ומתשמיש מיתותיהם. And the women, before they used to be with their husbands, used to go to the mikveh in the Nile. Used to purify. in the mikveh in the Nile. ובנות ישראל טובלות מן המידה ומן תשמיש המיטה. The Jewish women used to go to the Nile as a mikveh. That's what they used to do it. And the Egyptian says, Jews are dirty animals. They shouldn't bathe in what? In our water. This is our water. Jews are dirty. They shouldn't come to our water. They shouldn't use our water. They didn't care about the Jews being dirty, so-called. This came from the top, propaganda from the top, from Paro, to make sure he was thinking now the Jewish women will not be able to go to the mikveh, they're not going to be with their husbands, there won't be any children. That was the plan. Let's put the plan today in America. Paro's plan continues today in America. Anybody knows what is it called today in America? It has a name. People donate millions of dollars to it. Nobody knows? It's called Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is an organization that you can have abortions to make sure you're not going to get pregnant. Women goes to these places and they plan their family. It's a family. You got one child, it's one too many. You're destroying the environment already. Therefore, we should not have any more children. So that's what's called Planned Parenthood. מה עשו המצרים? So what did the Egyptians do? אחזו עליהן את המים שלא יטבלו. They held the water away from the Jews so that the women are not going to use the water. ולא יבואו זה על זה ולא יפרו וירבו. So they're not going to become fruitful and multiply like God's commandment. Therefore, this is measure against measure. It says, you let the Jewish women stay impure from their blood because you didn't let them go into the Nile. What am I going to do? I'm going to turn all your bathing places, the Nile, I'm going to turn into blood. Just like you did to the Jewish people, I'm going to do to you. This is what God says. לפיכך הפך הקדוש ברוך הוא את מימיהם לדם. This is why God turned their water to blood. שנאמר הפך את מימיהם לדם וימת את דגתם. This is how he turned the water to blood, and the entire sustenance of Egypt died. We are on page 3, middle of the page. The Rebbe gives a more precise information about this, and the Rebbe says, המצרים רצו להילחם נגד זה שבני ישראל פרו וישרצו וירבו ויצאו ממון מאוד. The Egyptians wanted to fight against the multiplication of the Jewish people. They were becoming too many. Why? Like we said, they were afraid they're going to join war with their enemies. Next paragraph. וכאשר הם ראו שלילודה בעם ישראל יש כיף שעם העובדה שבנות ישראל תולדות מים, and then they say, the Jewish women don't ever go with their husbands unless they go to the mikveh first. In other words, before a Jewish woman has a relationship with her husband, she goes to the mikveh. It's a taboo by them. Says they're crazy. They're not going to go with their husbands unless they go to the mikveh. החליטו שהדרך להילחם כנגד זה עד שיסגרו את המים. So they decided, let's take over the water. שלא ירח מעל יצרה שום מקוואות. ואזי נשות ישראל לא יוכלו לטבול. So this is a way to prevent the Jewish people from going to the mikveh. This way there's not going to be any more children. They just solved the problem. כי בנות ישראל הן כגן נעול אשר נזהרו מאוד בתחילת משפחה. It was a taboo by the Jewish women to never go with their husbands unless they've been to the mikveh. Actually, it's very interesting. In the entire history of the Torah, we only know of one case in Egypt. And this case has been recorded, we're going to discuss it right now, of one woman who went with her husband without a mikveh. And it was such a strange case that it was recorded. Yeah, we're not going to discuss it right now, but just imagine what kind of a thing it was in Egypt. So let's continue. We're on page number 4. המצרו מצאו עצה שכלפי חוץ הם יראו אנשים טובים, שלא אנשים לפחים אחד מעשיו, but the Egyptians had the same problem as today. People think that only today people are politically correct. Paro also did everything politically correct. See, he had his nation to answer to his nation. There were many things he was just afraid to go against another nation. It's not nice. People will realize that you're going against this nation against nice, tomorrow you're going to go against you. So he did everything in a politically correct way. What did he do? He says, ולא אכזרים, we're not cruel, שגוזרים גזרות וביחד עם זה. So he says, so we're not cruel, we're just going to make a rule that non-Jews and Jews shouldn't intermingle. The water for the Jews becomes dirty. So Jews can do whatever they want, right? Let them go to their own places, do their own, but the Nile they cannot use. Our water they cannot use. This is one of the things. We're not going to kill them. In the beginning, he didn't say, let's go and kill them. Throw the boys into the Nile. That was later on, down the road. But in the beginning, he was trying to do it in a politically correct way. Just like in America. You don't want to say, Margaret Singer, whatever was her name, that created Planned Parenthood, was a white supremacist. Her main goal was to make sure that there's not going to be any black offsprings. That was the goal of the beginning of Planned Parenthood. If you want to research it, go put on Margaret Singer. She's the founder of Planned Parenthood, and see that it actually says in the charter that this was one of the goals, to bring down the amount of black people in America. Yeah. וביחד זה, הם נלחמו נגד הפרוב וישרצו, הם סגרו את מקורות המים. ועל זה הם נענשו מידה כנגד מידה. And this was the punishment, measure for measure. שהקדוש ברוך הוא השיב להם במכת דם, שכל המים שבביאורים, באגמים, בכל מקום שחזרו להיות מים והפכו לדם. So God punished them. You say, you close the water to the Jews, I'll close your water space and turn it into blood for you. Measure for measure. We're going to skip for now. We're going to get back to it, where it says B on page number 5. And we're going to go to C, page number 9. We're going to get to B in the end. Source number 6. So the idea was here to make sure that the Jewish people are not going to be numerous, like we said before. So it says number 6. So this was the plan. וישימו עליו שרי מיסים. They put on him ministers of taxes. למען ענותו בסבלותם, ויבן הרי מסכנות לפרעה את פתאום ואת רמסס. They started taking taxes from the Jews. What was the taxes? The taxes was in labor. You have to work for us in labor camps. They couldn't care less if the Jews built something or they didn't build something. They didn't take the Jews because they were great builders. That's not why they took them. They took them because they wanted to separate the men and the women. If you make labor camps, you put the men away from the women. That was the idea behind it. And it, nevertheless, even though they separated the men from the women, still the women were giving birth like crazy. Like it says, כאשר יענו אותו כנרבה וכנפרוץ ויקוץ בני ישראל. So it says, not only it became worse, it becomes much worse. And now there's even more children. And the Jews have so many children, each woman, and the Egyptians are still having one child. Not because somebody is forcing against them. They don't want to have any. A child is a problem that we're going to see soon. So, ויעבידו מצרים את בני ישראל בפרך. The Egyptians gave the Jewish people hard labor, בחומר, בלבנים, בכל עבודה בשדה, כל עבודתם אשר דומה בפרך. All kinds of hard labor they gave the Jews. And again, remember what's the objective. The objective is population control. Planned Parenthood. That's the objective. וימררו את חייהם, they embittered their lives. כשראה שהם פרים ורובים, הוסיפו למרור חייהם בעבודה שבתחילה. ואיבן הרי מסכנות ולבסוף אף בכל עבודה בשדה. So in the beginning, they just took them away a little away from their homes to build cities. When that didn't work, they started working them far away in the fields, in the other side of Egypt. Why? Because again, they wanted to separate the husbands and the wives. And there was another reason. When a person is working hard labor for 18 hours a day, when it comes evening, what do you think he does? He goes to sleep. He doesn't have the power to procreate. שלא היה מניחים אותם אפילו להרגיע עד בלעם רוקם. They didn't even let them, like there's an expression, swallow their own saliva. That's how hard they worked. אלא עצים ודוחקים ומערים אותם כדי ליגעם. They made sure they're all the time working hard. וישנו כל הלילה מתוך יגדם. So they will have to sleep the entire night because they're so tired. And they're not going to do the commandment of be fruitful and multiply. Page 10. Darash Rabbi Avira. So the question is, so how did they have children? If it looks like a great plan, it would work, I would think. So Rabbi Avira explained to us why it didn't work. Why didn't it work? בשכר נשים צדקניות שהיו באותו הדור נגאלו ישראל ממצרים. It says, it was in the merit of the righteous women that they were redeemed. What did the women used to do? בשעה שהולכות לשאוב מים, at the time they used to draw water, they used to go to the well, to the Nile to draw water, הקדוש ברוך הוא מזמן להם דגים קטנים בחדיהם. God brought them, so instead of drawing water and then looking around for food all day long, so at the time they drew the water, fish came together in the bucket. So what? So he says they didn't have to run around all day long and find food, because the food was right there with the water. That was the idea. So one was of water and one was a fish. And what would they do? They would take these two buckets, one with water, one with water with fish. מוליכות אצל בעליהן לשדה. They would walk it to their husbands in the field. They would march miles and miles and miles to their husbands in the field. ומרחיצות אותם. They would use one bucket to wash their husbands. וסחות אותם. They used to give them oil. מאכילות אותם. They used to give them to eat the fish. ומשקות אותם. They used to give them the water. ונזקקות להם בין שפתיים, שנאמר אם תשכבו בין שפתיים. And then they would have relationships right over there. Because the women wanted children. It didn't. The men couldn't think about children. It was the women who wanted it. So the women made sure they're going to have children. And then Paro is stuck now. Instead of the Jewish problem becoming better for him, it's becoming worse and worse. Now the population is out of control. So what does he do? Let's look at source number 9. ויצב פרעה לכל עמו לאמור, כל הבן הילוד היורה תשליכהו וכל הבת תחיון. Paro commands, look, there's no other way. Now we have to kill the boys. That's it. And we're going to take the women for us. The girls are going to come to us. That was the idea of Paro. Let's call it, we have to kill the boys. There's no other way around it. We tried everything else. PC didn't work. Politically correct things didn't work. We have to start killing the boys actively. Actively killing the boys. Then what happened? We're going to see in source number 10, Tana Amram Gadol Ador Haya. Amram was the leader of the generation. Amram was Moshe's father. כיוון שראה שאמר פרעה הרשע כל הבן הילוד היורה תשליכהו, he saw that Paro says all the boys should be thrown to the Nile. Amar leshavano amelim, he says to the women, why are you running over here for us to have children all the time? In other words, we're bringing children, and what's going to happen to them? They're going to throw the Egyptians are going to throw the children into the Nile. So what did Amram do? Amram amad vegiresh et ishto. Amram went and he divorced his wife. Now you have to understand, at the moment that Amram divorced his wife, he was giving a message to the Jewish people. He was their leader. At that moment, the entire Jewish population divorced their wives. In other words, the plan of Paro succeeded. That's it. They were completely separated from the wives now. They were divorced. The men were living with the men in labor camps, and the women were back in Goshen. There was no connections between the two groups. Paro won. Completely. So Amdu Kulam vegirshu et noshotem. The entire Jewish nation stood and everybody divorced the wife. Page 11. At that time, Amram had 2 children. Moshe wasn't born yet. He had Aaron and he had Miriam. Miriam and Aaron. So Miriam comes to her father, Amra lo bito, Abba gzeratcha kashe yoter mishel paro. So Miriam tells her father, Father, you are worse than Paro. In other words, you think you're good? You are worse than Paro. She says, what do you mean I am worse than Paro? Paro lo gazar ela lazcharim. Paro only had a decree only on the boys. Right? He only kissed the boys. Ve'ata gazarta lazcharim v'anekevot. And by you divorcing your wife, you made sure we're not going to have not Jewish males and not Jewish females. There's going to be nobody's going to get born. So actually, Paro only wants to kill half the population. You want to kill everybody. So you're worse than Paro. Paro lo gazar ela ba'olam hazeh, v'ata ba'olam hazeh olam haba. It says Paro only decreed what's happening down here, but you never know what's going to happen in the world to come. By not bringing children, you made a decree in this world and in the world to come. In other words, you're sinning, you're going against God. God said, be fruitful and multiply. And what are you doing? The opposite of what God says. If Paro is going to succeed or not going to succeed, maybe yes, maybe not. You don't know. 50-50. Atat Tzaddik says, you're a righteous person. If you divorce your wife, yeah, for sure your decree is going to be upheld. The Jewish people are not going to go against you. They might go against Paro, but they're not going to go against you. In other words, she tells her father, you're worse than Paro. So what did Amram do? Amad ve'echzir et ishto. Amram went back and remarried his wife. Amdu kulam ve'echziru et noshotem. Not only he did now, the entire Jewish nation now remarried their wives. Va'ikach va'yachzir. So it says, and he took. היה רוא להיכתב. אמר רב דין וזה שעשה לו מעשה ליקוחים, הושיבה בפריון, והרוב ומרים מרקדים לפניה, ומלכשת אמרו, אבא מני שמחה. When he remarried his wife, he did it in a big celebration. So that's going to be a message to the Jewish people. It's not just something that I am doing, it's something that the entire Jewish nation should do. There was a big celebration around the whole thing. Okay. I'm just thinking if to do this now. Okay, let's do this now. So the Rebbe says, כמו כן, just like this, ישנה הוראה עיקרית הנלמדת מהנהגתם של נשי ישראל. We can learn something from the behavior of the Jewish people. Both the women that ran after their husbands to have children, and both Miriam that saved the entire Jewish people by telling her father to remarry her mother, and this is how Moshe was born, who's going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. Okay? So the Rebbe says, אודות הנהגתם של נשי ישראל, שבזכותם יצאו אותנו ממצרים, מסופר בגמרא. So the Gemara explains, עד כמה שהשתבלו עבור שלמות העם. It says, the women in Egypt went out of the way so that they are going to have children. כלומר, להגדיל את מספרם של בני ישראל על ידי כללות העניין של פור ורבות, to make sure they're going to have many children. ועד כדי כך שלא יתפעלו מקושי הגלות. And no matter what difficulties Paro put in front of them, they overcame it. וכיוצא בזה. ולא עשו חשבון שאם זה אז מתאים לכך. They didn't make the calculation. Today, you know, in this modern world, you tell somebody, oh, you're going to have a child. He says, no, it's not the right time right now to have a child. The interest rate is up. Who can afford college right now? Forget about it. You know, it's just not the right time. Imagine what they could have said. These women could have said, right now to bring children for what? So they're going to be killed? So they're going to become slave? That's the worst time to bring a child. And today, we have the same disease. People say, we cannot afford a child. It is impossible. The times are too hard. We're not going to have children. Or one is enough. Two is enough. The question of family planning is, it's only a question of numbers. Are we going to start it after 2, after 3, or after 4? That's modern families today. The family planning is a must. But the women in Egypt didn't do that. That's the idea. And because of that, Zachu Kol Bnei Israel, because they didn't do it, we merited to go out of Egypt. Page 12, כלומר, and let's analyze their thinking. למרות שמצד השכל היה מקום לעשות חשבון שאין זה הזמן מתאים, if you're looking at in a logical manner, you could say now it's the worst time in the world to bring children. Now is not the time to bring children. They could have said a calculation. You know what's going to happen to our children? They're either going to become slaves or they're going to be killed. Now to bring children, what are you, crazy? מכיוון שפרעה גזר כל הבן, הילוד היולד שלחו, because Paro decreed, throw their boys into the Nile. So in other words, all the work that we're doing, we're bringing the children for what? So they can suffer? We're bringing lives into the world. And this is exactly what the argument is with abortions today. Listen to the argument. It's exactly the same argument. Nothing changed. You know what people say today? What? If she's a poor, she's a poor girl, she's going to have a child. What do you want the kid to suffer? That's what you say. So in order for the kid not to suffer, you know what we should do? Kill the kid. Abort the baby. Planned Parenthood. Nothing changed in the argument. It is exactly the same argument that Paro came up with when? This is almost 4,000 years ago. People think there's something new in this world. It is exactly the same argument. There's nothing different in the argument. Abortion, you know what? Abortion is a good thing. You know why it's a good thing? Because it saves the mother from pain and suffering. What does she need to see? This child grow up in poverty? Is this child go up to become a slave? Maybe even die because he doesn't have enough medicine? I don't know. Which it doesn't happen in America, but let's say it does. So let's not have children at all. אף על פי כן, nevertheless, the women at that time לא התפעלו מחשבונות אלו. They didn't make these calculations. והמשיכו למלא תפקידן להעמיד בנים ובנות בתוך אמונה בתוך כשthey trusted in God. They said, God wants us to do our parts, we're going to do our parts. ומי פעל זאת? And who started this whole thing? מספרת הגמרא, the Gemara tells us, ילדה קטנה ששמה מרים, a small little child. Her name was Miriam. And by the way, do you know why her name was Miriam? Mar in English means bitter. The reason why she was called Miriam, because when she was born, the decrees were at the most severity. This is why her father divorced her mother. He says, look at the decrees, they're so severe, we cannot bring any more children. That's what she's called bitter. That's her name. And she comes to her father, היא פנתה לאביה בתמימות ילדותית, she came to her father, ואמרה לו, and she told him, you are worse than פרעה. ועל ידי זה פעלה שהתבלו כל החשבונות בנוגע לקיום הציווי פרו ורבו. In other words, she went against all the calculations that people are making when it comes to family planning. וכתוצאה מזה נולד משה רבנו, and because of this, Moshe was born. The one who's going to take us out of Egypt. And the one who's going to bring us to Mount Sinai. That we still celebrate until today. Last paragraph. והנה כל סיפורי התורה אינם רק כדי שיראה מהר בעבר למפרע. So this story is not something that for us to know history book. The Torah is not a history book. It is something for us to learn from. כי אם גם הוראה בחייו של כל אחד ואחת מישראל בהווה. It's a teaching for us right now. ובנוגע לענייננו, when it comes to us, מודגשת בסיפור זה ההוראה עד כמה צריך להיות מושלל כל המושג של תכנון משפחה. How much family planning has to be out of the Jewish psyche? one should have children. אלא צריכים לקיים את הציווי פרו ורבו. We need to make the commandment, the first commandment that was given to man, be fruitful and multiply, without any calculations. You know, people today have 2 kids, and then they say we can't afford to have a 3rd kid. If people, I'll give you an example. My daughter is married to Moshe. You know Moshe, right? Moshe's mother is one of 17 kids. Yeah, nice, right? A nice amount, right? Nice amount, right? I'll give you an idea. To put a kid in yeshiva cost about $20,000 a year. Imagine you have to put 17 kids through yeshiva. You probably have 10 kids at the same time, right? In yeshiva. Obviously, he's not going to pay $20,000 a year for every kid. He can't. Yeah? But imagine the toll. So what should the parents say? We're not going to bring kids. Why? Because it's hard to go through yeshiva? They're going to have... No. The kids are the kids. You bring kids as many as possible. Now, if the wife is not healthy or she's too tired, that's something else. We can talk. But just not to bring kids because we want to have a more comfortable wife, because if we're going to have a kid, we won't be able to afford a BMW. That's pretty much what the people are going through. We can't pay both for yeshiva and to replace our BMW every year. We'll have to, God forbid, every 3 years to replace the BMW, and that we're not willing. So that's worth more than a kid. No, that's not the way of thinking. Okay. לכן עושה האדם חשבון שאין ביכולתו לפרנס ילד נוסף. Sometimes we make stupid calculations that we don't have the ability to bring one more kid into this world. And that is stupid. Because God gives us sustenance. The more children you have, the more sustenance God will give. You know, I live in a religious world. I know many families who have more than 10 kids. I don't know of one, I've never heard in my life of a kid in a family who didn't go to yeshiva, who didn't get education. Never happened. Never happened. There's no such cases. It doesn't happen. I've never heard, you hear a story over here, a story, but usually it's because of somebody is crazy, that somebody doesn't have enough food. There's no such things. God gives. If you bring the children, God will give. That's the idea behind it. We're almost out of time, but I would like to put one more point, and if we have time, we go back to bet also. One more point into this, which is a very important point, and we're going to take a lot out of it. If you go to page 14, we're going to see the place where Moses met God. ומשה היה רואה צאן יתרו, חותנו, כהן מדיין, וינהג את הצאן אחר המדבר, ויבוא אליו אלוהים חורבה. So Moshe was a shepherd, and he's taking his sheep to the desert. And then, וירא מלאך השם אליו בלבת אש. And God revealed himself to him with fire. מתוך הסנה, from inside the bush. וירא ניסו, והנה הסנה בוער באש, והסנה נענו קל. The bush is burning, and he's not getting consumed. We all know the story. ויאמר משה אסור עיניו ויראה את המראה הגדול הזה, מדוע לא יבער הסנה? Moshe says, I want to see this great vision. Why is the bush not burning? וירא השם כיסה לראות. Hashem saw Moshe coming. ויקרא אליו מתוך הסנה, ויאמר משה משה. He says, God is calling up to Moshe, Moshe Moshe, and Moshe says, here I am. ויאמר אל תקרב הלום, שנעליך מעל רגליך. It says, don't come close. Take your shoes off your feet, because the place you are stepping on is a holy place. ויאמר אנוכי אלוקי אביך, אלוקי אברהם, אלוקי יצחק, אלוקי יעקב. It says, I am the God of your father, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And here's the place that we have to learn from. Look at what Moshe does. ויסתר משה פניו, Moshe hid his face. He went like this. Why? Ki yareh mehabit el haElokim. Because he was afraid to look at God. What does Moshe do? He doesn't look at God. Let's continue. Later on, what happens? Vayomer, Moshe comes to God and he tells him, Har'eni na kvodecha, I want to see your face. Oh. When God revealed himself to him, when God wanted to show himself to him, what did Moshe do? Moshe says, I don't want to see it. Now, after a while, Moshe comes to God and says, I want to see you. I want to see your face. And what does God answer him? Vayomer lo tochal lirot et panai, ki lo era ani adam v'chai. It says, no, too late. You can't see my face. Now let's see. The Talmud actually explains this process. And the Talmud says like this. Al ma'amar Hashem leMoshe, on the words of God to Moshe, Vayomer lo tuchal lirot et panai, ki lo ereni adam v'chai, says, you're not going to be able to see my face because a human being cannot see my face. Shanu mishmo shel Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha tells us the reason. כך אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא. God tells him so. כשרציתי להראותך את כבודי בסנה, לא רצית. He says, there used to be a time when I wanted to show you my face. Then you didn't want. Right? וכפי שנאמר, ויסתר משה פניו, כי ירא מהביט אל אלוקים, says, you were afraid to look at my face. עכשיו שאתה רוצה, he says, now that you want, הראני נא את כבודך, you ask to see me, איני רוצה. I don't want. Moshe is mean. God is mean. Right? It looks like God is playing measure for measure. You didn't want, so I'm going to... No. That's not what's happening. God gives human beings opportunities. God knows when is the best time for a human being to have kids. God knows. God decides when a human being wants to get kids. And what do some people do? Some people say, no, now it's not the time. Let's take some women today, by the way. This is a disease that specifically is going to come into the world and it's going to really be shown in the next 20 years. You're going to see. You got all these women who believe in feminism to such a degree that they put career over family. They don't get married. And then all of a sudden, their career, they find themselves at the age of 35. No one wants to get married to a woman who's 35 years old when you can get married to a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. She cannot find a husband. And even if she finds a husband and she wants to have kids, you know what? It might be too late. This is what God's message is to Moshe. It says, I have a specific time for every Jew that I know this is the time for him to do something. An opportunity for him. You don't take the opportunity when you have the time. Don't think that the opportunity will come again. It might not come again. And by the way, it goes in everything. It goes in business. It goes in with the family. It goes with opportunities. When God gives you something, an opportunity to do something, take it. God knows the best time to have kids. And if you're not going to take it when God suggested for you to take it, you will never be able to take it maybe. Don't play with him. This is the message from over here. So some say, you know what? Since we're almost out of time, I'm just going to do the last time. Some people, you know, Rabbi, you told it to me now, you know, except you, most of us already had our children. Right? Now it's too late. What am I saying now? So the answer, no, it's not too late. It's never too late. What do I mean it's not too late? It's not too late to have children now. We can have children now. Talking about me and you. No. We can have children now. Me and you. Me and you can have children now. Not get married. Talking about old people like us.
Old guys like us?
All guys like us. You know how? Because having the Rebbe never had any children, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Do you know how many kids are named Menachem Mendel in the world? How many? in every Chabad family and in almost every Hasidic family, there's a Menachem Mendel. Yeah? Why? Because all the Hasidim, all the pupils of a person are considered to be what? Are considered to be his kids. So even though we might not have to have physical kids, our DNA kids, we can have spiritual kids. An opportunity. Either we teach them, or we donate money to a yeshiva, or we donate money to a shul who teaches kids. In this way, we can also participate in those things that we didn't participate in the past. That we might have not. In Judaism, there's no such thing as too late. Even though it might look, maybe for your DNA it might be too late, but you can still have children. Spiritual children. As many as possible. Just like we are the children of God. Let's skip to page 16, because we're almost out of time. Page 16, second paragraph. But what do some people do? כאשר מתערבים עם חשבונות אישיים, when we're starting to make God's calculation for him, and we tell God, you know what, God, now it's not a good time for children. Now we just got married. We're thinking about expanding the house. If we expand the house, how are we going to pay for children? You know, it's not the right time right now. We just put a down payment on a new car. Who's going to have money for children right now? This is when we mix up in God's plan. ואומרים שעניין זה ידחו למחר. We say, no, let's push it to tomorrow. Either children or something else. It doesn't matter what. ועניין שני ידחו למחר. And something else, we're going to do it in 2 years from now. ישנו על כך סיפור נפלא שהגמרא מספרת בנוגע למשה רבנו. We can have this story from the Gemara about Moshe. And the story is like we just mentioned. It's not that God is telling Moshe, I'm mad at you that you didn't want to in the beginning, so now I'm giving it back to you. He says, God, when it was time to do it, I told you it's time to do it. Now, it's not the time. When you're 40, when you're 50 years old and you want children, and you're sorry about what you did in the past, that's not the time now. The time to do it was when? When I told you to do it. I told you the time to do it. Don't think the time is now. In other words, it's not a punishment. I know when the time is. You pushed it away. You pushed it away. You pushed it away. So what do you want now? What can I do? There's nothing else I can do, God says. אלא יש הוראה בדבר. But what we can learn, בשעה שסומכים על, when you trust in God, if God says be fruitful and multiply, I'm going to be fruitful and multiply. Is it hard? It might be hard. הרי הוא יודע, God knows what's best for us. ויודע, so a person says, I cannot bring a child because I don't know if I'll be able to support him. What does that even mean? What the Planned Parenthood says, let's abort the children. Why? Because we don't know if we cannot support them. What does that even mean? How can you even think of such a thing? All those children that should come, it says Mashiach is not going to come until all the souls are going to come down to earth. By bringing souls down here to earth, we cause Mashiach to come that much faster. Every soul, there's a certain amount of soul that has to come down to the world. Once the soul has been brought down, that's it. Mashiach will be here. So we cause Mashiach to be pushed away because we know better than God. עם כל הפרטים, ואם כן, הקדוש ברוך הוא בוחר אותה. It says, let God choose the time. God knows the best time for us. God knows the time for the child and for his father and for his mother. He knows best. Trust him. He knows what he's doing. מה שאין כן במצב של כשרציתי לא רצית, and when God tells him, Moshe, when I wanted you did not want, כאשר אין סומכים חס ושלום על מועד רצון השם, when we don't trust God that God knows what's good for us, we think right now we can't afford to have the children, ומערבים רצון אישי ועושים חשבון, we make a calculation, והרי כל אדם, אפילו גדולי בני אנוש, and every person, even the greatest of men, הוא מדוד ומוגמל מבחינת יכולתו לחשב. We don't know when is the best time. If you're not going to have the child now, maybe you're never going to have the child. And what? You have a career? Good. What are you going to do? You know, all these women today, and this is an awful thing. You know, it's an awful thing for the women. Men can tolerate without having a family. And men can get married no matter when in life. For women, it's hard to get married. Imagine, you have a great career, you're 35, you want a family right now at 35. The clock is ticking. It's going to be hard for you. I would say today, you should look at the thing, but I am sure that 50% of the women who are not married by the age of 35 are never getting married. Never. Which means she's going to leave. She's got a great career. She might have a great career. But she's going to be retired at the age of 45, 50 because she's got a great career. She doesn't need all the money. What is she going to do from 40 to 100? She's going to live 60 years, what? With cats by herself, without a family? Think about a miserable life. Why? Because she had plans. She knows better than God. And she got pregnant 5 times throughout her life. And what did she do? No, I can't bring the child over. Either I don't like the guy, or this guy is not serious, or it was just a one-night stand, or right now is not the time, I'm in the middle of career, I have to go somewhere on a trip. She's not going to have children. God specifically set it up for her to get pregnant at certain times, and she took the children away. She took the opportunities away. And by the way, it's not just with pregnancies. It's with the entire life. Opportunities come, we have to grab them. We don't tell God, don't get involved in our lives. If God put an opportunity inside your life, take it. It's there for a reason. Don't push it away. It's not going to come again. Now is the time for it to come. הוא מדוד ומוגמל מבחינת יכולתו לחשב. We cannot make a calculation. לדעת ולהעריך. הנה, בשעה שהאדם מציב מדידות והגבלות אלו, when we constrict God, הוא אומר שאינו סומך על המועד שבו רציתי. He says, I don't trust this time. This is not a good time. This is not good time to have a child. This is not good time to open a business. This is not good time to go to college, even though the opportunity comes. רצון, והוא ימתין למועד ויקבע את החשבון בלא רצית. He says, you know what's going to happen? When you want to, what will God say? I don't want. It's not a punishment. It's a consequence. It says, now it's not the time. You have a limited amount of time. This is the time that is required by you. That's why God is pushing it. So don't go against God. So, in the end, the Rebbe says, אין המטרה להפחיד מישהו חס ושלום. We're not over here to scare somebody, God forbid. המטרה היא בסוף הכל לחזור על הדברים הכתובים בתורת אמת. We want to teach the things that are written in the Torah. הוראה בחיים, כי מצד טבע הטוב, because God is good, and God wants to give you all the good in the world. We are the one who push God away. God wants to give us all the blessings in the world. Do you know one kid who grew up poor, who now says, I didn't want to get born? It's stupidity. He says, where would you hear such a thing? There's no such cases. God forbid people who are born completely maimed, completely made, in pain, their entire life. You ask them if they want to be born. Of course they want to believe. Imagine not living. And we are looking at, in today's society, abortion, what's the big deal? Abortion here, abortion there, abortion here, abortion there. Some women, it became almost a way of contraception. Yeah? God gave you a present. You don't know if God's going to give you a present again. Now is the time that God gave it to you. How dare we go against God?